Well, hi, Kelly. It's so great to see you and hear you. It's really nice to have you on my show, and I just really appreciate your being here. I actually met you. I was watching you testify in front of the Nevada State Legislature, and I was really intrigued with your story because a little bit of it is very similar to mine. And I actually stalked you on Facebook to see if I could find you to meet you. And I'm so glad I found you and that you agreed to be on Test Those Breasts. So welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Jamie. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's not something I normally talk about, which is funny, but when I found out that they needed somebody to testify, I went and testified. So it was nice that you reached out to me.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just really glad that you did testify because it was very intriguing to me. One of the things that we really are concerned about are these mammograms and early detection. And I know that the Senate Bill 330 that you'll talk about a little bit later has everything to do with making sure that women, hopefully at some point, all women are able to get whatever mammograms that they need and every year and have it paid for because we know that early detection is where it's at. I mean, that is so much better than, being diagnosed at stage, 2, 3, 4, instead of very early on.
Well,
So go.
it is required for them to cover that. It's SB 330 was to cover all the diagnostic tests after they had a, sketch mammogram.
Oh,
So
okay. Thank you
on
for
top
thank
of
you.
that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for
So
clarifying that because it is so complex and not a lot of women. I mean, I learned so much from what I did watch, and there's so much more to know. So thank you for clarifying that. And
yeah,
it's just so
so they
important for,
yeah, they
yeah,
legally have to cover at least the basic mammogram now, right now. And
okay.
then we're just trying to go a little bit above and beyond with that with SB 330. So yeah, because
I,
you can get a sketchy mammogram and then they just say, okay, you're on your own.
yeah, I mean, the way they found mine was a diagnostics mammogram. I had had two lumpectomies in the past and they were benign, but I have very dense tissue, which many women do. And with those normal screenings, it's really difficult to see cancer in the breast. So, what are your thoughts about early detection?
So my thoughts about early detection is that it's so important to find it in stage one. I was one of those lucky ones that I did get it found in stage one. Um it's you've got like 90% chance of a 5-year survival rate if you find it in stage one. If you find it in stage four, it's usually incurable by that stage. And then it's a 22 to 50% chance of a 5-year survival rate. So it's critical to find it on those early stages and making sure it doesn't spread to other parts of your body. If you don't find it then, and we were really, I mean, women were given a really bad go during COVID when it came to diagnostics because they didn't do any of that at that time. They closed all the hospitals, they weren't doing mammograms, they weren't doing any kind of diagnostic. And I talked to my oncologist and they found a lot of cancers really late in women at that time because they weren't able to test and they weren't able to find them early. So like I said, it's just critical, and like I said, I feel like I'm the lucky one and a blessed that, when I found it, it was minuscule and I didn't even find it. The 3D mammogram found it.
Uh-huh.
And it wouldn't have been found with a mammogram, only a 3D mammogram. So I got lucky on that.
Yeah, I actually had to put off my mammogram during COVID, and I go every single year, so I was a little freaked out that I couldn't get it until a little while later because again, I had already had two lumpectomies in the last 8 years, and so I'm on high alert about that and know darn well that I need to get those. So when did you start getting your mammograms?
So I started actually really early. My grandma and also my great grandma both were diagnosed with breast cancer. And I know my grandma for sure had a double mastectomy when I was young. And so I started when I was about, I think it was about 35 or maybe 37. I started getting mammograms because my OBGYN wanted to make sure I had a base. And I had, really normal mammograms for, at least, well, until I was 50. And that's when I was diagnosed. So when I was diagnosed, I was going in for a routine and they asked me if I wanted to do a 3D, and I'm like, sure, I'll do 3D. They go, it could be a little extra, $50 extra or something. And I'm like, sure. I knew I had dense breast tissue. They had told me previously. And so I knew that a 3D would be much better than a regular mammogram and would be able to diagnose that. And lo and behold, they called me like a week or two later and said, we've got something sketchy and we need to look at this. And so I was actually going in for hip surgery. So I said, can we wait on this? And they're like, sure, we'll wait, but 2 weeks after my hip surgery, I crutched in and they did another diagnostic mammogram, and that probably wouldn't have been covered, well, my insurance was really good, but it might not have been covered for others if they went in for a diagnostic after a regular mammogram. So I went in for that and an ultrasound. So they just did a mammogram on that right breast and the ultrasound. And that's when the tech said, I need to get the doctor. And the doctor came in and said, yeah, 90% chance this is cancer. So, yeah, it was pretty rough. And I was by myself because I was used to, everything's going to be fine kind of thing. And so to get that diagnosis, where he was really sure, was a little shocking for me. And, I had to take a moment for myself. Like, you cry for a little bit. You're like, oh my gosh. And you think of the worst. And then you turn it around and you say, okay, all right, what do we do now? And that's what I did. I went, cried in that little dressing room where you put on that stupid little, robe and everything like that. And then I took it off, put my clothes on, walked out and said, okay, where do we go from here? And within a week I had a biopsy. And then within a month I had a lumpectomy.
Okay.
And I had lymph nodes removed. So they confirmed that it hadn't spread. So again, I was lucky.
Very good. Yeah. And you say that you were lucky, and you absolutely were, but I want to make it very clear to the audience, and as well, it doesn't matter what stage they find the cancer in. Cancer is cancer. And it is a very scary word. It is scary to even think that something like that is inside your body. So, sometimes people have told me, oh my gosh, you were so lucky that they caught it at stage 2, or they, and some people are, oh, they were so lucky that they caught it at stage 0. And yes, the earlier that they do catch it, it is a lot luckier than some people. But man, it is just scary no matter how you look at it. So I just, thank you for being so brave to tell us that story. And we do know that after we get mammograms, usually the radiologist won't call you back right away if something is not wrong, So I
They
remember
send you a
that.
letter. They send you that note. They say, it's all good. You tested normal. So, yeah. So no, I don't think they even call you if it's normal. They just send you a note and that's it. So, but then, if you're thinking that something's wrong and you're waiting for them to call, that can be stressful too.
Oh yeah, it's very nerve-wracking. I just feel like I knew when I had that mammogram and I was called back, and I went into my little radiologist's office, and he had these big screens with my breasts up there and talked about the calcifications, and I just knew, and there was an associated mass, but I actually did feel it. And I do have dense breast tissue as well. But I did feel it. Mine was much bigger. It was like 5 centimeters or something like that. So listening to my body was really super important anyway. But
something to go on that. listening to your body, but also, I had a scare this last year where at the almost a little bit 3.5 year mark, I started developing lumps right there where my cancer was. And so I was convinced that it was coming back again. And
Oh
I was
no.
like freaking out, and that sent me over the edge. But then they did an ultrasound and a biopsy, and everything was, I mean, as normal as it can be. It was just scar tissue developing, which
Okay.
I was not told that it could develop 3 years later. Like, I would think that it would develop like probably within a year of the surgery, but it was 3.5 years later. And then I get this. So you can feel that, and you can feel like, oh my gosh, it could be something, but it could end up not being that as well. So I think the trick is to not let your mind go crazy. And that is something that really hard to control.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I it's you have to have some support. And I only let a few people know at the beginning, because I just didn't want a lot of questions and a lot of bantering, like, are you okay, and what's going on? And then how everybody looks at you. Everybody looks at you different.
Hmm.
You're the cancer person. Oh my gosh, she has cancer. And they do the little voice, cancer. And it's just like, dude, it's fine. It's okay, we're living with it, and we're going to get through it.
Yeah.
So it the mental aspect is huge, and that is the one that you have to really try to control your best, because number one, stress is going to make it worse. Number two, your mind can lead you down the craziest paths and the scariest paths, like, okay, especially with women and breast cancer, because you're like, okay, well, okay, we're going to chop them off. Then we're going to have to, get reconstruction. I really don't like, the fake breast, but am I going to do it? What am I going to do? There's just all that crazy stuff. And then, oh my gosh, well, what if it spread? And then where is it gone? Is it gone to make my pancreas? Is it in my uterus? Where is it? So you've got to really kind of tunnel vision, compartmentalize it to help yourself. And then
And
if you have,
don't Google stuff.
oh, yes.
That was the one piece of advice I got at the very beginning. It's like, if I had one piece of advice, do not Google stuff, because you can
Mhm.
get really into that rabbit hole and freaked out. So yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that, mental health is something that we really need to address, and making sure that we're seeking, therapy so that we can talk to someone and try to, do some meditation, or there's so many different techniques that we can do. And
Mhm.
I was definitely in a scary place when I was diagnosed, and it's been a very interesting, crazy journey. But yeah, I totally agree. I'm having a colonoscopy here coming up, my second one, and I'm like, oh my gosh, are they going to find something in there? And I've got to keep my mind, manifest some positivity or something like that,
Well,
positive in a good way.
yeah, and colonoscopies, I had my colonoscopy right after, I was during COVID, and it was right after my breast cancer, and they did find, one or two
So,
polyps that were
polyps.
precancerous, and but they just removed them.
Yep.
So that's the nice thing about a colonoscopy. They can just come in and clear it out and take care of it right away. So
Right.
it's, it's not as, it's very preventable again.
Yeah. I just think that sometimes when you have had cancer and you're going in to get another test, you're like,
Hmm.
it's scanxiety and things
Yeah.
like that. So many women, let's talk a little bit more about that dense breast tissue. Why is it important for women to know that? And I do want to kind of go also back to, a lot of women don't know the difference between a breast cancer screening, a diagnostics mammogram, and a 3D mammogram. Can we kind of talk a little bit about the importance for women to know, and that isn't it required that they know now, because something, a law just passed that women need to be informed that they have dense breast tissue?
Yeah, I believe they did pass something where they have to let us know. So, I mean, I can't remember what you know what, they vacillate between so many ages now, because it used to be like you need to start getting your mammograms at this age. Now it's this age and this age. But
Mhm.
you need to do what's best with your doctor, and you
Right.
need to really communicate with your OBGYN or just the GYN, and make sure that they tell you all the information, because a lot of times they will like skim over, okay, you're good, all right, move on, and they don't tell you that you need
Mhm.
to, sometimes you need to advocate for yourself and ask, like, do I
Mhm.
have dense breast tissue? And it just means it's just fattier and it's just denser and it's harder for them to see stuff. And so cancer can hide in there. And it's also statistically proven that women with dense breast tissues will get cancer, is more prominent.
Okay.
So, if you have dense breast tissues, then you might have to be doing more mammograms. But again, that's with your doctor. You need to find out. Um, and if you think there's something sketchy or something like that, or you don't agree with your doctor, then go to another one.
Yeah,
But
I'm a huge advocate of advocating for yourself. I'm
mhm.
kind of a pain in the neck to my doctors because I ask questions, I want clarification, I want a second opinion, things like that. I'm not, I just really think that doctors are so busy. There's so many people with cancer right now,
Yeah.
and things can be overlooked. And for me, I had to remind my doctor of things every once in a while. So I just, keeping good notes, having that caregiver, somebody who's going to like that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you of why it is important to have someone at those appointments. During your appointments, what was your experience like?
Well, first of all, you think about the oncologists, the, cancer doctors, it's routine for them to talk about it every day. This is something that they do every single day. So they may skip something or forget to tell you something. And if you're not asking the important questions, like what's my cancer? Where is my cancer? What's the survival rate of this? What's the treatment? If you're not asking all those questions, they might skip over it, and then you might leave the appointment and like, wait, what happened? I don't remember, the answers. And so I always brought one of my girlfriends with me, which I was lucky because it was pre-COVID, because during COVID, nobody could go with anybody. I remember at Cancer Care Specialists, I was going there and they weren't allowing anybody in unless they, basically had to have cancer to walk through the door. So, you weren't allowed to have anybody with you. But before, I was allowed to have somebody with me, and she took notes, and then she would ask questions too. She didn't feel, like she didn't say, "Hey, Kelley asked this question." She's like, "Oh, hey, so what's going on with this, and where do we go from here?" So she would help, advocate for me as well. So it's
Good.
always good to have a girlfriend, a significant other, or somebody there with a notepad or, a phone to type in the information and stuff like that, just so you get the names, dates, information. Because when you go in there, sometimes you're in there, and then you might fog over because you hear too much information, or you hear information like some people just black out with cancer. They're like,
Mhm.
cancer,
Mhm.
oh my gosh. And then
That
they
was
start,
me.
yeah, they go down the rabbit hole and they start freaking out. And so if you're not completely focused, you're going to miss some of the important
Mhm.
information, like, is it estrogen driven? Is it progesterone driven? Is it, do you have BRCA? And I did the genetic testing for that. So I don't have BRCA, but, I am ER positive, which is estrogen receptor positive. So that's important information to know, because then I had to be put on a regimen of medication for the next 5 years or maybe even 10 to block that estrogen from feeding the cancer or feeding anything in there. And hopefully there's no cancer it feeds, but it was, brought on or fed by the estrogen.
Okay. So it's very fascinating because when I first was diagnosed, I really started learning about all the different kinds of breast cancer. And I remember one of my friends said, why can't they just go in there and just chop it out of there? Like, just get it out of there right now. And apparently, because I had HER2 positive, estrogen and progesterone negative.
Mhm.
So with that, what they do, at least with my treatment, is they did the chemo first to shrink the tumor. And then I did the double mastectomy and the reconstruction. And then I did not have to have radiation because they did remove some lymph nodes and the margins were clear. And so therefore I did not have to have radiation. So in your case, you had the lumpectomy, but did you
Mhm.
also have to have radiation?
I did. So I did the lumpectomy within a month. And then I actually, I was against my doctors, but they wanted to do radiation right when I was done with my lumpectomy and my surgery, but I ended up pushing it off a couple months because um it was during the holidays and I just couldn't do radiation 21 days straight during the holidays. And it was my choice. So hopefully it doesn't bite me later, but it was 21 days of a radiation for 15 minutes. Radiation was, aside from the burns and very minimal of burns, it was pretty simple and easy. I drove myself there. We went in, or actually, let's go back. First, they give you tattoos.
Hmm.
So you do the tattoos on each side of your, armpits and then right in the middle of your breasts. And then you go in and they line you up every day. And the first day was probably a little bit longer because they took a little longer to line you up, but it was about 20 minutes the first day. Then after that, every day for 15 minutes in the afternoon.
So
And
they
then,
call that mapping, right? So that you
mhm.
go in and you get mapped, and that's where the tattoos come in.
Uh-huh.
And then you go in and apparently from what I've heard is that the radiation is very, very um uh like focused, laser focused
Mhm.
on that area. Not always how it's been, from what I understand. It's much more precise and concise and targets right at that area. That's pretty
Yep.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it focuses right there. And then the last five visits were much more intense. They just kind of really zap it at the end. Um, but yeah, it's interesting because you're locked in a vault. It's a vault, and the walls are like probably I don't know 2 feet deep. It's like a vault door, and when they shut it because they don't want the radiation to get out. But so you're kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm putting all this radiation on my body now.
Right.
But
Did
yeah,
did you get fatigued?
a little bit, but I still worked full time at the time, and I get a little tired, but really not too bad. But that
So
again,
in
uh-huh.
So in hindsight, when you were talking about how you didn't want to do that over the holidays, do you think that you probably could have handled that over the holidays, and because it was maybe not as bad as you thought it would be?
No, and it wasn't that wasn't the reason why I didn't do it. I
Okay.
didn't do it because of my schedule. I just had too many
Okay.
activities and I couldn't. You have to be consistent with it. I had
Yeah.
to do it like at 3 o'clock every single day. And I
Yeah.
couldn't do that at that time.
Cancer kind of puts a damper on your social life.
Right. Right? It kind of mess well, and the funny thing is it I had a trip to Hawaii in that January, and I actually got my tattoos right before I left for the trip. And then I started radiation the day after I got back from the trip, but I wasn't going to miss the trip. I said, I go, for my mental health, I need this trip. I
Right.
need to go. I've had everything. I'm going to start my radiation when I get back. I promise, and everything's going to be fine. And lo and behold, that was January 2020. And I finished my radiation end of February 2020. If I had
Okay.
pushed off my trip, I would never have gone.
Right. You're absolutely right. It's really interesting that you just told me that story, because now I know that you and I have a little bit more in common, because in March of 2020, we really wanted to go to New Orleans, the lockdowns were happening, starting to happen. And I was like, do we go? Do we not go? I had never been. My husband had before, but I was super excited about going. And anyway, long story short, we did not end up going because it was a major COVID hotbed. And good thing we didn't, because it was just terrible. And then the following year, March of 2021, I had rescheduled, and then it became a hotbed again. Like it really never went away. Like New Orleans was hit hard,
Yeah.
and we had to cancel that trip. And then fast forward a year and a half later, we were supposed to go to my husband's army reunion in last August 22. We had to cancel that because I had breast cancer. So, um, and then it turned out that I ended up going to New Orleans in December, just this last December, to have my deep flap autologous breast surgery. So
Oh,
lo and
wow.
behold, that's what got us to New Orleans. and I get and I get to go again in August for my phase 2 breast surgery that's coming up here pretty quick. But the other thing is that last June, when they had discovered my breast cancer, they also discovered this huge thymoma tumor that was sitting up against my heart. And
Oh,
it was like in my thoracic cavity, and come to find out that was causing this rare anemia that I developed through this whole entire journey. So I had we actually had a Hawaii trip planned for last October, and because of the chemo that I had to have, and being in that situation, we had to cancel it. So I put it off to January, and then it turned out I had to have emergency surgery to get that thymoma tumor out of there at the end of January. So I had to put it off again. And then I had to get on these medications that were going to suppress my immune system that I'm on right now. So they were telling me that I couldn't go to Hawaii when I rescheduled it in late March. And I said, no, I am going to start these meds the day that I come back from Hawaii. I'm going to Hawaii. I'm not going to cancel it. I need it for my mental health. Just let me go. I want to have the time of my life, and then I will start those meds. And so lo and behold, we went to Hawaii. We had the time of our lives, and I actually started my medications on the day that we flew back. So it's so funny that you
yeah.
that your Hawaii trip, and good thing you got to go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a thing that they don't discuss a lot with people is the mental health part.
Yes. Yes.
Because the body, they can take care of that, but they can't take care of this. You have to take care of that. And you've got to make sure that it's, in a good place, because I find that some people with just the smallest cancers will pass away because they go straight down that rabbit hole
Mhm.
and they're doomsday, and they feel like, okay, I'm going to die no matter what.
Yep.
And then there's people that have the stage 4 and they live forever because they're optimistic and they're living their life, and
Yeah.
that's what you need to do.
Yes. And thank you for saying that, because I was going down that rabbit hole for a little while, probably for the first, I would say the first month that I was diagnosed. And then I woke up one night and I was like, okay, I got to figure something out. I got to I got to turn this bus around, and I've got to figure out how this whole entire journey is going to go down, because I can't go down this road that I've been going down. And then I went, that's when I really reached out and became a lot more open. And I know that you were very secretive about your cancer, and everybody is completely different, and everyone gets to handle their situation in the way that they see is best for them. So that's one of the reasons I really appreciate, your being open enough to let me stalk you on Facebook and message you, and and then opening up to me. And I'm very grateful that you are part of advocating for, the mammograms, and with the Senate Bill 330. I know that a lot of states have already passed that. You know what? I was wondering, in the show notes for our episode, I'm wondering if we can put a link in there where people can go in and find out more about the Senate Bill 330, so that they can be aware of what they should be able to do.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea. It's
Yeah.
very detailed, and it's the bills are usually legalese, so it's kind of hard to read sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think so too. And I know that you do have in here your email address in case anybody has any questions for you. Maybe something resonated with them, who
Hmm.
some of the audience that are listening. Are you okay with people reaching out and asking questions?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very, like I said, I was very closed at first. It was a private journey for me and stuff like that. And I don't go out and start doing public speaking or anything
Yeah.
like that, or, you know, but when people have asked me, or, they're struggling with something, I'm happy to talk about it if it helps one
Yes.
person, you know, and when my friend works for the Cancer Coalition, and she's the one that she knew I had cancer, and she asked me to testify, and I testified previously for education and other bills before, and so they asked me to do that, and I said, well, you know what, if it's going to help people, absolutely, and it could help millions of people. We don't know.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. I saw that was Carrie Harrington you're talking about, right?
well, no, actually, Michelle Lambert works for
Oh,
Carrie, but I've
okay.
known Carrie as well for a long time
That's
as
how
well.
I met her. I was watching her testify as well, and I
Hmm.
found out that she was really good friends of a friend of mine. So she introduced me to Carrie, and Carrie actually is interviewing for one of my episodes as well. And so I just really think like I'm a super open person, and I think that once we have a diagnosis like like it's a sisterhood of all sisterhoods,
Hmm.
and I feel like I had so much help when I first found out. It was amazing how many people reached out to me who had breast cancer in the past and said, if you need any help, if you need any support. And I felt so that I felt the love. And I feel like um, the more we can get our stories out there and the more resources and the more we can try to unravel those complex things like mammogram types of mammograms and genetic testing and the law on what insurance companies have to pay for and how to advocate for yourself. I just think that the more we get out there with each other and link arms and do it together,
Hmm.
the more I think that we can help so many people, Kelly. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that we got to have this conversation, and maybe we can come on another time and talk about another part of your journey. But
Hmm.
I'm just really thankful that you're here.
One of the laws too is that women don't know is if you have a double mastectomy or mastectomy, they
Mhm.
have to pay for reconstructive surgery. And that's something people
Yes.
don't know either. That's a law.
They
So,
do. And
hmm.
also, they do have to pay for it. But I'm also on an advocacy group that is trying to push that. There's a coding crisis going on right now that hopefully is going to be changing because of our advocacy work. The deep flap reconstruction that I had, where they take the tissue from your abdomen and they reconstruct your breast with your own tissue and your own blood vessels and everything, the insurance companies are trying to change it so they don't have to pay for that surgery. Instead, they want to pay for the old version of that surgery where it compromises your muscle. And so we've been fighting for to make sure that they actually have to pay for that as well. Mine was paid for to a point. I had an out of network situation, so I actually did have to pay out of pocket because of the out of network. And there are so many people who are like, you shouldn't even have to pay anything out of pocket at
Mm-mm.
all. But it was worth it to me. But if they had changed that code before I actually wanted to get that surgery, there's no way I would have been able to afford it at all. Only
Yeah.
wealthy people would be able to. And
Yeah.
that's not okay. So
That's
thank
not
you for bringing that
equality.
up.
Yeah. That's not
Yes, that
equality in healthcare.
no, nope, it is not. And so thank you for bringing that up because that is so important. So, do you have anything else to say before we wrap up here?
Just to make sure that, everybody, that your listeners know that they need to if they get some kind of diagnosis, that they need to advocate for themselves and speak up. And don't be afraid to ask any question. No, there's no silly questions. And the doctors, if they're not listening to you, then they're not the right doctor for you. And if they're pushing you off and telling you, oh, it'll be fine, da, 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 then maybe you need to seek out another specialist, and get the best care you can, and make sure you advocate for that and get a partner to help you. You don't need a huge group of friends or anything like that. You just need one or two good people that will help you through that process. If you want to,
Yes, don't do it alone.
yeah, don't do it alone. If you want to have a party, great. But I just get it one or two that are really good, that help you out, and make sure that they're there for those appointments so that you can get all the information you need. But
Love it.
information is king here.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. Well, thank you very much, Kelley. And to my audience, thank you so much for joining. And we will see you next time on Test Those Breasts.